autumn of 2014, a team of cavers exploring unmapped passages in the Dordogne region of southwestern France discovered something that would take 4 years to excavate and may never be fully understood. Deep inside a limestone complex approximately 200 meters from the nearest known entrance, they found a chamber, oval, roughly 8 meters long, 4 meters wide, and inside 17 people. Not buried, not scattered, not collapsed in random positions. Arranged in a descending spiral pattern, bodies positioned head to foot, each one slightly lower than the last, creating a human spiral that curved from the chamber's outer wall toward a central depression in the floor. No skeletal trauma, no evidence of violence, no signs of struggle. Just 17 people who had positioned themselves in a spiral formation and remained there until death. But here's what made the discovery team immediately contact archaeological authorities. The chamber walls were covered in the same spiral pattern, carved, painted, repeated hundreds of times in red ochre and black manganese. And in the central depression where the human spiral terminated, there was a single object. A carved stone, spherical, covered in spirals, still cradled in the hands of the person positioned at the center. The expedition leader's report to the French Ministry of Culture contained one line that defined the investigation. The living became the symbol they were marking. This is the story of 17 people who arranged themselves into a spiral and held that formation until silence claimed them. 22,000 years ago, the Dordogne Valley was one of the most densely occupied regions in Ice Age Europe. This was late Gravettian territory anatomically modern humans who had survived the last glacial maximum through sophisticated adaptation strategies. They hunted reindeer and horses across cold steppes. They fished for salmon in glacial rivers. They created elaborate art-carved figurines, engraved plaques, painted cave walls, and they understood caves as more than shelter. The Dordogne contains over 400 known decorated caves Lascaux, Fond de Gaume, Rouffignac, where Paleolithic people ventured deep underground to paint animals, handprints, and geometric symbols in chambers that had never seen daylight. These weren't casual expeditions. Reaching some of these chambers required crawling through narrow passages for hundreds of meters, navigating vertical shafts, crossing underground rivers. They were pilgrimages, journeys into Earth, descents into symbolic space where normal rules didn't apply. Most decorated caves show evidence of repeated visits over thousands of years, layers of painted figures, multiple artistic styles, generations of symbolic activity. But the chamber discovered in 2014 designated La Caverne Spirale by the research team was different. It had been visited once, and the visitors had never left. Dr. Simone Archambault, lead archaeologist from the Institute of Prehistory in Bordeaux, directed the excavation. Her initial assessment noted the chamber's extreme isolation, over 200 meters from the nearest entrance, through passages that required technical climbing and tight crawl spaces. Getting 17 people to that location would have required planning, equipment, and determination. Her preliminary report included this observation. The site represents intentional congregation in an inaccessible location. Exit was possible, but apparently not desired. The excavation of La Caverne Spirale took 42 months. The chamber was pristine, no secondary deposits, no animal disturbance, no evidence of later intrusion. What Dr. Archambault's team uncovered was choreographed, symbolic, and increasingly deliberate. First, the human spiral. When forensic archaeologists mapped the 17 bodies, the pattern became unmistakable. They formed a continuous descending curve beginning at the chamber's outer wall and spiraling inward toward the central depression. Each person was positioned on their right side, head oriented toward the next person's feet, bodies slightly overlapping. The outer ring contained 7 individuals. The middle section contained 6. The inner curve contained 4. And at the center, the termination point of the spiral, lay a single person, curled tightly, hands wrapped around the carved stone sphere. The arrangement wasn't accidental. Someone had planned it, executed it, convinced 17 people to position themselves in a specific geometric pattern and maintain it until death. Second, the demographics. Osteological analysis revealed the 17 individuals ranged in age from approximately 14 to 65. There were men and women, adolescents and elders. Genetic analysis suggested multiple family groups, 3 distinct matrilineal lines, possible sibling relationships among several individuals. They weren't all from one family. They were from a community, selected or volunteered from different kinship groups. Isotope analysis showed they had lived in the Dordogne region for most of their lives. Strontium signatures in tooth enamel matched local geology. Carbon and nitrogen ratios indicated typical Gravettian diet: terrestrial game, freshwater fish, wild plants, and they were healthy. No pathological markers, no signs of malnutrition, no skeletal evidence of disease. Whatever brought them into that cave, it wasn't desperation or illness. Third, the wall decorations. The chamber surfaces were covered with spirals, not carved deeply like the check chamber. These were painted. Red ochre and black manganese dioxide applied with fingers, moss pads, and possibly animal hairbrushes. Dr. Archambault brought in Dr. Jean-Michel Geneste, a specialist in Paleolithic cave art. His systematic documentation revealed 347 distinct spiral motifs, all rotating clockwise, all descending from outer rings toward a central point. Some were small, 5 centimeters in diameter. Others covered entire wall sections over a meter across. But they all followed the same pattern: outer ring, middle ring, inner ring, center point, exactly like the arrangement of the bodies on the floor. Fourth, the central stone. The spherical object held by the person at the spiral center was approximately 12 centimeters in diameter, carved from limestone. Its surface covered in miniature spirals, at least 60 individual carvings, each less than 2 centimeters across. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The stone had been shaped, smoothed, and carved with precision that would have required hundreds of hours of work. Dr. Geneste's analysis identified tool marks consistent with flint burns, specialized engraving tools. The spiral patterns showed consistent depth and spacing, the work of a skilled artisan. This wasn't a found object, this was a created object, made specifically for this purpose, whatever that purpose was. Over the next year, Dr. Archambault's team conducted microscopic analysis of the chamber environment and skeletal remains. What they discovered suggested a timeline far more controlled than simple ritual death. Palynological analysis revealed traces of plant material scattered throughout the chamber. Not random vegetation, specific species, artemisia, wormwood, and traces of hyoscyamus, henbane plants known from later contexts for their psychoactive and sedative properties. The distribution pattern suggested deliberate placement, small concentrations near each body position, as if each person had been given a portion. Dr. Archambault brought in Dr. Laurent Bouby, an archaeobotanist specializing in prehistoric plant use. His analysis suggested the plant material had been processed, crushed, or ground before deposition. Someone had prepared these plants, distributed them, possibly consumed them. But here's what made the discovery significant. Chemical analysis of the sediment directly beneath several bodies revealed alkaloid residues consistent with plant-based psychoactive compounds. The 17 people had ingested something before they died. Deliberately, Dr. Valérie Delattre, a bioarchaeologist specializing in Paleolithic mortuary practices, examined the skeletal positioning in detail. What she found was both methodical and unsettling. The bodies weren't simply lying in spiral formation. They were touching, overlapping, connected. Each person's left hand was extended forward, resting on the shoulder or back of the person ahead of them in the spiral, like a chain, a connection, a continuous link from the outer ring to the center. Dr. Delatre's report noted, the positioning suggests conscious placement while alive. The hand positions require muscular tension to maintain. These individuals arranged themselves, made physical contact with the person ahead, and held that position until death. And then came the discovery of the ochre. When archaeologists examined the hand bones of all 17 individuals, they found red ochre staining, not on the surface, absorbed into bone structure. The same absorption pattern documented in other sealed chambers, the kind that occurs when pigment is applied to living skin and held in contact long enough to penetrate tissue. Every person in the spiral had coated their hands in ochre before making contact with the person ahead of them, connecting through color, through symbol, through deliberate marking. But the most disturbing evidence came from the person at the center. In 2017, Dr. Archambault authorized high-resolution CT scanning of the individual holding the spiral stone. The skeleton belonged to a female, approximately 25 to 30 years old at death, well-nourished, no pathology, no skeletal stress markers. But the scan revealed something in her chest cavity, between the ribs, where soft tissue would have been. A second carved object, smaller than the stone sphere, roughly oval, covered in spirals. Not placed there during burial, placed there during life. Dr. Delattre consulted with forensic pathologists. The object's position suggested it had been inserted through the abdominal wall, deliberately, while the person was alive. The trauma would have been significant, the pain extreme, the risk of fatal infection high, but skeletal analysis showed bone remodeling around the insertion site, healing, integration. She had survived the insertion, lived with the object inside her body, for weeks, possibly months, and then she had walked 200 meters into a cave, positioned herself at the center of a spiral, and held a carved stone sphere while 16 other people arranged themselves around her. And they had all stayed there, connected by ochre-stained hands following the descending spiral, until the plants they had consumed pulled them into unconsciousness, until their breathing slowed and stopped, until there was nothing left but bones in spiral formation, and 347 painted spirals watching from the walls. Since the excavation, researchers have proposed multiple theories to explain why 17 people would descend into an isolated cave chamber, arrange themselves in a spiral pattern, and remain there until death. None provide a definitive answer, but together, they reveal the complexity of late Gravettian cosmology. Some anthropologists believe the spiral represented a path of transformation, a symbolic journey from the outer world toward a spiritual center. The woman at the center, marked internally with a carved spiral, may have been seen as an anchor point, a portal, or a guide. By positioning themselves in spiral formation and maintaining physical contact, the group may have believed they were creating a living conduit, a human passage between worlds. The psychoactive plants would induce the altered state necessary for crossing. The ochre on hands would activate the connection. The spiral stone held at the center would serve as the focal point where transformation occurred. They descended into earth, formed the symbol, and allowed the symbol to carry them through. This theory explains the meticulous positioning, the emphasis on physical connection through touching, the preparation of the central individual with an internal marker, the use of psychoactive compounds, and the choice of an isolated underground chamber as a liminal space. It accounts for the voluntary nature and the apparent calm of the arrangement, but it fails to explain why 17 people were needed, why that specific number, why that exact formation, and if this was meant to be a passage to another realm, why do the bodies remain? In most shamanic traditions, the spirit travels, but the body returns. What made this different? What made this terminal? A more pragmatic interpretation suggests the group was responding to an existential crisis, not environmental, but spiritual or social. Perhaps they believed their world was ending. Perhaps they saw themselves as the last carriers of sacred knowledge. The spiral represents continuity, eternal return, the cycle that must not break. By embodying the spiral, by becoming the symbol themselves, they may have believed they were preserving something essential. The woman at the center, marked internally, could represent the seed, the core, the compressed essence that would re-emerge in future cycles. They didn't die to escape. They died to preserve, to encode, to become the message that survives when everything else collapses. This theory explains the careful selection of participants from multiple family lines, the elaborate preparation including internal marking and carved objects, the symbolic completeness of the arrangement, and the choice of a protected location where the pattern would remain undisturbed. But there is no archaeological evidence of crisis. The Gravettian occupation in the Dordogne continues uninterrupted through this period. No sudden abandonment, no population collapse, no environmental catastrophe. If they were preserving something, what was the threat? And for whom were they preserving it? They sealed themselves in a chamber no one would find for 22,000 years. A darker theory proposes this was an experiment in collective transcendence, an attempt to achieve transformation through geometric discipline and chemical alteration. The spiral is found throughout nature in shells, in plants, in water, in galaxies. By arranging themselves in spiral form while under the influence of psychoactive compounds, they may have believed they could access fundamental patterns of existence. The touching created circuit, connection, shared experience. The ochre activated the link. The woman at the center, with a spiral literally embedded in her body, served as the biological anchor for the geometric form. They weren't trying to go somewhere else. They were trying to become something else, to merge individual consciousness into pattern, to dissolve identity into geometry. This theory explains the precise mathematical arrangement, The emphasis on maintaining physical contact, the use of consciousness-altering plants, the internal marking of the central figure, and the apparent absence of fear or struggle in the final positioning. But it cannot explain how they convinced themselves this would work. How does a 14-year-old agree to lie in spiral formation, consume psychoactive plants, and wait for consciousness to merge with geometry? What demonstration, what teaching, what experience made this seem achievable? And if it worked, if they achieved what they sought, what does that mean? Their bodies died. Their consciousness, if it merged with anything, left no trace we can measure. The most speculative theory suggests the spiral cave was a repository for those who had been marked by something we cannot name. Perhaps the woman at the center had experienced something, a vision, a revelation, a contact with something beyond normal experience that changed her fundamentally. The internal object marked her as transformed, contaminated, or elevated. Others who had similar experiences, or who sought to share her transformation, gathered to join her. The spiral formation wasn't random. It was the shape of whatever they had encountered. By embodying it, they were honoring it, joining it, or perhaps containing it. The isolation of the chamber wasn't about privacy. It was about quarantine. They descended into Earth to take something with them that should not remain in the world above. This theory explains the selection across family groups rather than single lineage, the extreme preparation, including surgical insertion of objects, the choice of the most isolated chamber available, and the finality of the act with no provision for return or rescue. But it offers only speculation. There is no evidence of what marked them, what they encountered, what they believed they were containing, and it fails to address the fundamental compassion problem. Among the 17 were adolescents. If this was about quarantine or removal of contamination, why include the young? Why not send them back to safety? Here's what we know for certain. 22,000 years ago, 17 people descended into a limestone cave in the Dordogne. They were healthy. They were selected from across their community. They were adolescents, adults, and elders. They prepared. One of them, a young woman, underwent surgery. A carved spiral object was placed inside her body. She survived. She healed. They gathered plants. They crushed them. They prepared them for consumption. They walked 200 meters underground, through narrow passages, through darkness. They entered a chamber that had never been occupied. They painted the walls with 347 spirals, and then they arranged themselves in a descending spiral pattern: outer ring, middle ring, inner ring, center point. Each person positioned on their right side. Each person extending their left hand forward, touching the one ahead. Hands coated in red ochre, creating a connected chain from the outer world to the center, where the marked woman lay curled around a sphere covered in spirals. They consumed the plants they had prepared. They maintained their positions as consciousness altered, and they stayed there, connected, spiraling inward, until their breathing slowed, until their heart stopped, until the pattern they had formed became permanent, until there was nothing left but bones in geometric precision and spirals covering every wall. We don't know what they believed the spiral would do. We don't know if they were creating a path, preserving a pattern, accessing a frequency, or containing something that needed to be buried. But we know they believed it completely. Every painted spiral, every positioned body, every ochre-stained hand holding the connection. This wasn't accident, this wasn't desperation. This was devotion to geometry, and whatever they thought would happen when 17 people became a living spiral in darkness, whatever they believed their pattern would accomplish, it was powerful enough to convince them all to descend into Earth and hold formation until death. The cave is sealed again now, protected, silent, but the spiral remains beneath the Dordogne. 347 painted symbols on the walls, 17 bodies arranged in descending curves on the floor, still connected, still positioned, still holding the pattern. And at the center, a woman with a spiral carved into stone inside her chest, holding another spiral in her hands, still anchoring whatever they thought they were creating, still marking whatever they thought they were becoming. If this story affected you, you're not alone. La Caverne Spirale remains one of the most enigmatic discoveries in late Gravettian archaeology, and it raises a question we may never answer. What could 17 people have believed about spirals that was worth becoming one in darkness? If you want to explore more mysteries like this, patterns we can trace but never decode, formations we can document but not comprehend, stay with us. Every week, we descend into the spaces where geometry and faith become inseparable. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What do you think they were trying to create? And if this story stayed with you, share it. These patterns deserve to be remembered. Every spiral holds a story. This one holds 17 people who became the symbol they were seeking. See you in the next pattern.